Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is our impromptu midsummer checkup episode. My name is Ryan, and I'm once again joined by my co host Alex, who has just returned from Italy, and my other co host Zach, who has just returned from a lovely week following the glorious Vancouver Whitecaps through the beautiful world class city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the slightly less world class, slightly less fun city of Montreal, Quebec. So, this episode is just going to be a brief checkup. The Canucks have had, the draft and free agency have now passed, and we're now at the point where we can start looking ahead to next season. So we'll start by talking about free agency. Alex?
Yeah, so 5 major signings as well as 2 kind of minor league guys. Excuse me. So added to the Canucks NHL roster, Jake DeBrusk, Danton Heinen, Kiefer Sherwood at forward, Vincent Desharnais and Derek Forbort on defense, as well as Yuri Patera and Nate Smith, likely playing in Abbotsford, but could potentially be on the NHL roster. Anyone thoughts on any of the moves?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's two things that I'm happy about, and there's two things that I'm concerned about. I'm happy that we addressed our depth as well as finding a third goalkeeper, as obviously goalkeeper injury problems were prevalent in the playoffs. So being able to have a third goalkeeper locked up after Demko and Seelovs, as well as forward depth in Denton Heinen and Kiefer Sherwood, those are two things that I'm happy about. And the two things that I am not happy about are, first of all, missing out on a lot of. I'm happy with DeBrusk, but we missed out on a lot of guys who I think would have been better options. And I'm also unhappy with the choices around our defense. And I only say that because I think we needed another top 4 defenseman, and we got Vincent Desharnais and Derek Forbort. Now, these are two players who I don't necessarily mind having in the lineup, two players who I think could do well, but they play the same role. I mean, you're going to have those two guys that join a bottom pairing area with, like Noah Juleson, Tyler Myers. We have a lot of grit in our defense, and outside of Hughes, Roenick, and Susie, I'm not quite sure we have enough two-way contribution. So that's just my general thoughts on our free agency.
So just, excuse me, starting with DeBrusk rather than the defense, we'll come back to that. Who in particular do you think would have been a better pickup than Jake DeBrusk?
Well, I'm upset that Jake Gensel, after the constant rumors and the constant ties from the media, just ended up going to Tampa, and that was that. I thought Tyler Toffoli was maybe another guy that we could have made a good run at. The DeBrusk signing kind of surprised me. I mean, I see him as I don't see him as a top line forward per se, but I definitely see him as like a middle six guy who could get second and third line minutes consistently and do well. But I guess, and I can't really say I'm upset about the term with DeBrusk, because basically every forward in this class got like a long-term deal, something that was longer than I thought would have been what they actually got and what I would consider reasonable. So I'm not upset with the DeBrusk pickup. I think it's good, but I still think that there's a need to have at least one more guy who can play top 6 minutes in the forward core.
Yeah, with DeBrusk, I initially was a little, I'm going to say caught off guard by it, but I'm actually starting to like it more and more the more I think about this, just based on kind of like a style of play and team fit kind of thing. I think more than any of the other kind of high-end wingers who went in free agency, he really fits how Rick Tocchet wanted to play hockey. Like, I don't think, using Toffoli as an example, Toffoli's not really going to provide much in terms of two-way play. He's pretty much just a pure goal scorer at this point. DeBrusk, I think, is a much better two-way option, and I think he can forecheck a lot. And I also think we saw when he was playing with Patrice Bergeron a few years ago what he can do when he has that elite center with him, like he will, hopefully, with Elias Pettersson in Vancouver, versus what's happened last year since Bergeron have retired and the Bruins have had weaker center depth. So I think we're buying in on getting the DeBrusk that we saw with Bergeron, who's going to be that very high-end producer and can get you 60-plus points a season. He's eclipsed the 25-goal mark a few times. I don't think that's true of many of the wingers Elias Pettersson has had, save for Andrei Kuzmenko, who just was not made for Tocchet hockey. So honestly, I think DeBrusk is a signing that, while it's not necessarily what I would have ideally chosen going into free agency, I can really see what they were trying to build here, and I do think this is one that could work out better than some people think right now.
Yeah, I think you're right about the Tocchet hockey thing. He obviously had, as we saw, he plays a very strong two-way game with all 12 of his forwards. I think you definitely get that more from DeBrusk. And I think you'll get that as well from, everybody else that we signed, Kiefer Sherwood, Danton Heinen, Darnay, and Forbort for sure. And the thing that I wonder, though, is we have a lot of grit, but in this free agent class, outside of DeBrusk and potentially Heinen, we didn't get that much skill. And when you lose Lindholm and you lose Zadorov, who in the playoffs was very much a good two-way player. He's known for his physicality, but he scored goals. He created chances. He was fantastic with that in the playoffs. I wonder how this free agency class, under Tocchet's guidance and under the coaching of the team, will step into the shoes of, your Elias Lindholm and your Nikita Zadorov, like those big two players who left us in free agency.
Yeah, I wonder too, partially, if you're looking at Niels Hoglander taking on a bigger role as part of this. I think he took some really good steps forward, obviously, last year, putting up, I don't even remember what it was, but he was one of the best even strength producers we had. So I think he's probably going to play something of a bigger role this year if he can keep up that pace. And I agree that we don't have as much skill, but I think we have more of a focus on fit than anything. And I think we've really done a good job at making sure we're not going to have another Andrei Kuzmenko type situation where we bring in a talented player who's not going to work and are forced into a difficult position where something has to give with one of them. I think we're very focused on making sure there's a lot of synergy here.
True. And I also think that the lack of free agent forward signings, only signing 2 players who you think would play in the top 3 lines, I think that opens doors to either potentially bringing in one of the restricted free agents that's been, rumored to be on the move, like a Martin Necas. I keep hearing that the Canucks are in on a restricted free agent, but I don't really know if there's anything to it.
Mm-hmm.
They also haven't named the player, which makes it even more, sketch. So you wonder if that's what they're leaving the door open, or if they're leaving the door open to bring Vasily Podkolzin into the lineup full-time next season. I think either is good, but I think that if they are wanting to return to where they were last season and compete for a cup, then bringing in someone through a trade or an offer sheet is the better of the 2 routes.
Yeah, I do think we have a little bit of cap space in the moment too, albeit not much. In that, where if you had some money going out in the process of making a trade, I think you could make something work for somebody. I'm not really sure. Like you said with Podkolzin too, I do think he's a guy they're probably going to want to get into a lot more games this year. I also wonder if they maybe see something in Kiefer Sherwood as untapped potential. I think there's a lot of... He's got a very good shot. He's very aggressive in how he plays. I'm wondering if they see kind of like a Dakota Joshua type player in him. Not necessarily that he'll reach the same heights as Joshua, but can be kind of a similar archetype where he comes here and produces more than he has previously in the NHL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard to see. Necas, I don't know if that'll end up working out, just given, one, the Canes' asking price is apparently extremely high. I know at one point they wanted... allegedly Chroncast RFA rights, a first-round pick, and Jonathan Lekaramaki or Tom Willander for him, which just ridiculous, frankly.
We can't do that.
We can't even look at that. But if their price goes down, maybe there's something to consider there. I don't know. It's a bit weird, and I do share some of your concerns with the defense, albeit I think they're kind of betting on improvement, which has been a bet they've hit on a few times so far with this coaching staff on the blue line.
Yeah, I definitely think they're betting on improvement, because that's been what's been happening, right? Yeah. With Dakota Joshua coming in and Sam Lafferty last season having probably the best season he's had in a very long time. I think that when I look at this class, I see DeBrusk sort of as getting a guy that can play on Pettersson's wing consistently, and potentially adding a little bit of size and physicality on that line. I see Danton Heinen as sort of like another Dakota Joshua project type attempt, where they'll bring him in and maybe he'll play on the third. I think they'll keep that JBG line together for most of, if not the entire season, injury dependent. But I think I could see Heinen getting minutes in that top 6. I could also see him on the 4th line, just depending on where he is. And I see Kiefer Sherwood as another attempt at a Sam Lafferty regen, someone who they can bring in and have on the 4th line that can maybe pitch up like 15 goals,
Yeah.
But yeah, I do still continue to worry about our defense. I think the way I think, and this is also, I think, a good segue into the next season expectations. I think at the lowest, I see this team performing in a similar way to how the Predators played this year, and I think that would be considered a bad season. I think they could either just barely miss the playoffs or get the wild card spot. I would consider that a bad season.
Mhm.
But the way I see it with these pickups is they're looking to have sort of that very gritty team that wins games, but just barely wins enough games to get anywhere and doesn't go anywhere. And at their best, I could see them playing just as well as they did last season if Tocchet and his projects with these signings seem to work out.
Yeah, and I think there's also the possibility of, in-season moves and trades, as we kind of briefly brought up earlier. I think on defense, we have taken something of a step back for sure, losing Zadorov and replacing him with Desharnais and Forbert to replace Cole. But I think the forward core looks better than it did at the end of last season. I liked Elias Lindholm, but I'm not really a super big fan of him, and frankly, he didn't perform up to expectations here. I think the contract he got in Boston is going to age like milk. And I think adding someone like DeBrusk and adding guys like Heinen and Sherwood who give you some more depth will help. So I think my estimate would be that we're going to look pretty similar to last year, and that will be kind of, I think, like you said, if we are in a wild card spot or just missing the playoffs, I would definitely be considering that a bad year. Whereas on the upside, I can see us basically getting back to where we were last year and fighting for the Pacific Division title and fighting to push further into the playoffs. Especially with the possibility that I don't think the fact that I don't think we're done adding to this roster at the moment.
Yeah, that's what's going to make or break this offseason, I think, is if they can manage to add one more piece, whether that's a top 4 defenseman or a middle 6 forward. I think there's definitely room for something like that to make it happen. I trust Patrick Allvin and I trust his insight, which is, again, still after this season, still refreshing to be able to say that about a Canucks general manager. So I think that one addition, being able to make it or not being able to make it, is going to make or break where they are next season.
Yeah, and I'm not too concerned with whether or not that comes in the off-season or in-season once they've had a little bit of a chance to see how the new pieces are shaping out. I think there's a chance that some of these guys could outperform what we expect, as we've touched on. Even Desharnais, I think he's 28, but he's only played one full season in the NHL, so I think there could be a little bit of untapped potential there, albeit not necessarily too much. So I think they are some guys who I think if the bets pay off, I think that this can be considered a pretty solid offseason as is, but it can be taken to a very good offseason with one or two more moves.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now the team on paper has taken a step back. I think both forwards and defense on paper have taken a step back in the last year, or not the last year, but since the end of last season. I still think that the trade that dealt Lindholm, that dealt Kuzmenko to get Lindholm, and has since seen Lindholm leave. I think that they're now missing that sort of player, that they were that top 6 guy that they had in Kuzmenko and then had in Lindholm. And I think that if last season's team was to play up to their potential, this would be considered a massive failure of an offseason. But because they had those guys who didn't, for example, Kuzmenko and Lindholm, and I think they all could have been better, and the team did all right with them performing poorly. So I think that this offseason is one or two pieces away from being considered a success.
I disagree with the Lindholm thing on one front, in that I don't really view him as, he never really spent much time in our top 6, and that the time he did spend there was, to put it simply, a failure. He didn't work out in our top 6, and he ended up working only as a third liner. So I think adding a guy like DeBrusk, who is actually going to be in the top 6, and I think will be able to contribute more as a top 6 player, could actually work out to be an upgrade over Lindholm. And I'd also like to point out, Lindholm last year, I don't remember their exact totals, but his point total and DeBrusk were actually quite similar. He's not producing at the rate he did a few years ago in Calgary. I think, again, going back to, I'd actually say this of both contracts that the Bruins signed of former Canucks players. if the Canucks had signed either Lindholm or Zadorov to those contracts, I think I actually would have been rather upset with management for those.
Yeah, I mean, fair. I think that with the Lindholm trade, though, and with Kuzmenko not fitting into the system, I think that they're still, they had lost 2 players and they had lost some assets. So I was really hoping that if Lindholm was to walk in free agency, they would be able to replace it with a guy who I could confidently say, like, this guy will fit our team better. And I don't necessarily see that in DeBrusk. I think he'll be a good player. I think he'll be a second line forward, but I was really hoping that they would be like, they'd be able to make like a big splash in that spot, right?
Yeah. I get where you're coming from, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think that's all I have to say about our free agency and draft. I really don't know anything about the guys who we drafted because not having a pick in the first 2 rounds kind of made me clock out of prospect research this year.
Yeah, like I can quickly sum up the draft before there's one more free agency topic I want to talk about. Draft feels like really they just bet on upside on all 5 of them, which is really the right approach when you don't have a high pick. You may as well take the guys who, like, they took all guys who have, I don't think any of them are guaranteed to play a game in the NHL, but that's going to be true if basically anyone picked this late. And they took guys who, if it works out, are probably going to have pretty consistent NHL careers. So, the bets work. One free agency related thing I want to take. When are they getting Seelov signed?
Yeah, that's a bit concerning. I don't know. I think they'll have to do it. Like, that he's not going to leave. If he does leave, then that's a player who shouldn't have left, who now has potential to go be a starter somewhere else. Maybe not this year, but next year. And I would consider that a failure from management because if they can't get him signed and your tandem is Demko and Patera, that's again a considerable step back from last season where you had Casey DeSmith as your backup and then you had Seelovs. So
I can't imagine we wouldn't re-sign him. I'm sure there's a legitimate reason as to why we haven't, and I think it's probably not as high on their list of priorities at the moment because they know they have him qualified and they have his rights at the moment. But I'm a little confused as to what's going on. Zach, I know you have a deep family connection to Artur Seelovs. Anything you want to bring up about this?
Yeah, I got kind of off guard because I think I misinterpreted the qualifying offer as him being extended.
Oh,
so I kind of already assumed he was.
Oh, no, he's just qualified at the moment, no contract.
Yeah, so because we're very low on cap space. I think it was about $1 million we had left. So I wonder if there's just a gulf in what he wants because of the playoff run and what we can give him.
Yeah, I guess, but I mean, for a player who's still more or less unproven at the NHL level, I can't imagine he'd be paid more than about $1 million, so I don't know.
Yeah, I can see him getting up to 1.5 just with the ludicrous contracts that have been given out to a lot of players in this offseason. I think he can take advantage of that. I wouldn't be surprised if this gets close to preseason before it's resolved. I do not think he'll leave. I think perhaps if they're putting this off, then they'd be working on something else that is obviously going to take up more cap and therefore more of a priority.
Yeah.
And that would be exciting to see because I do think Seelovs will resign. I think it'll probably happen in late August, though.
Yeah, I haven't heard any reports of friction or anything, so until I hear something like that, I'm not going to be too worried. It's more confusion than worry at this point as to just why nothing's happened.
Yeah. With that being said, is there anything else that we want to talk about?
Should we just quickly thank the Florida Panthers for doing the world a great service?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florida.
We thanked them last episode, did we not?
Last episode, the finals were not over.
Oh, well,
I was in Italy while that happened, so unless there was a mystery episode that happened without me.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, well, thank you, Florida Panthers. You have saved so much. Hockey. I know
Sergei Bobrovsky, I love you.
I know a lot of 50-year-old old head style Canadian hockey fans really thought that the Oilers had to bring it home. My parents, and it was just that was never the case. I don't think anyone in Western Canada wanted to see the Cup in Edmonton. I'm not sure anyone in Toronto wanted to see the Cup in Edmonton. I'm quite happy that the Florida Panthers saved hockey for us.
Yeah, I
And
think
also congratulations. Like
congratulations on your first Cup, Florida.
another team winning their first Cup before Vancouver.
Or
But
Buffalo. The
nonetheless
1970 expansion class is still without a cup.
Nonetheless, another first Cup for a team that has really turned it around drastically in the last 5 or so years. A team that once was like a laughingstock of the league at the same level as the Arizona Coyotes now packs
The
the
artist
barn
formerly
on a
known as the Arizona
regular.
Coyotes.
Yeah, packs the barn on a regular, has a fantastic roster, fantastic players, great culture, great coach, and now they have a cup. So congratulations, Florida.
No, the way I heard it put was, for Canadian hockey fans, if you're an actually majorly devoted fan of any team other than Edmonton, you were cheering for Florida at that point. Not necessarily entirely true, but true in many cases. And the person I'm happiest for of all here, I think this is going to be true of most Canucks fans, is Roberto Luongo. Getting to see him finally lift the cup was just, what a moment that was. Like, that's been coming for so long. He's really deserved it. So I'm just so happy for Lou here.
Yeah, and another former Canuck who really it was unreal watching him lift the cup. It was really warmed my heart to watch Oliver Ekman-Larsson become a Stanley Cup champion.
That was just a fever dream to see. The contract he got,
unbelievable.
The contract he got for that too in Toronto now. He's being paid by 4 teams to play for one, has a ring, and will be making multiple $1 million a year for about, I think it was 4 more years or something? 3-year or 4-year deal?
Yes, it was like a 4-year contract. I think $3 million a year.
Brad Treliving is making it feel like Jim Benning was never gone.
Brad Treliving is my favorite general manager in the NHL, and it's only because he works for my least favorite team.
And if he was good, then he would absolutely not be my favorite. But the fact that he's terrible and in Toronto just makes him such a beautiful man.
You have to wonder how long it'll take before there are actual violent protests on the streets of Toronto, on Front Street, outside Scotiabank Arena, demanding his resignation. Because never forget when Canucks fans flew a Fire Benning banner over the city in a plane and then protested outside Rogers Arena. If this continues for another year or two without a Mitch Marner trade and without any form of on-ice success, I think there could genuinely be a riot in downtown Toronto.
How many years did they give Chris Tanev again?
I think it was like...
Was it like
God,
5
I'm going to have
6?
to look this up.
Like...
it was too many because he's old.
Like,
6-year, $27 million contract.
Yeah, like... Absolutely zero disrespect to Chris Tanev. I love Chris Tanev. I will love him until the end of his career, and I'm very happy for him to be getting this paycheck with his hometown team.
I'm still
what
upset
are they
that he
doing
has to play for
giving
Toronto.
him that long?
Isn't he
33 years old? Okay, yeah.
Don't even question it. Just enjoy it, man.
This is going to be a fun couple years for Toronto.
Yeah. Benning, Treliving, Travis Green, Craig Berube. Just don't compare. Just enjoy him, man. Also, shout out the Ottawa Senators for hiring Travis Green. I know I've mentioned that on a past episode, but that's also going to be very fun to watch.
That's
how
Ottawa,
long
we are
Brady
praying for you.
Demands a trade.
Oh God, I'm surprised he hasn't already.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, I think that we should talk about the only other team sport thing going on right now that is getting any of our attention, and that is the international football tournaments.
May I just ask you quickly, ahead of the Euro final, do you guys have a prediction as to who may win and where it may go?
My heart is telling me... Actually, no, we'll start with my brain. My brain is telling me Lamine Yamal is going to cook Kieran Trippier, score a brace, and Spain are going to win. But my heart is telling me it's coming home.
I've used my brain since February, so it's coming home.
It's coming home. Alex, do you have a prediction?
Yeah, no, this is going to be an interesting one for me. First of all, I'm expecting a very boring game just based on the tactics that these teams employ. Southgate ball is just, oh my lord.
Okay, well, Southgate ball was actually not that bad in the last game. I have to say. I slander the man more than anybody else, and I genuinely still question some of his roster tactics. But yesterday's game was very exciting.
You're an England fan, though, so you have some emotional stake in this one. As a neutral, I will say the game yesterday was fine, which compared to the rest of England's games was like a 10 out of 10 experience to watch.
Yes.
So
they did not deserve at all to get there, but
That
And
was not a
questionable
penalty.
aside, it definitely was not a penalty.
That was
Even
not
though
a
I'm an
penalty.
England fan, it was not a penalty. But the fact of the matter is that Watkins goal, even without the penalty ever happening, that Watkins goal brings it to 1-1. And the way England played, they just deserved to win that game.
Yeah, that was an
So
incredible goal from Watkins.
Compared to every other England game, it felt like I was watching a different team.
Yeah.
And it gives me hope that the game against Spain, which everybody thought would have just been manslaughter, will be a little bit better just because I was able to watch them play one competent game this entire tournament against the Netherlands.
Yeah. So just based on precedent in recent years in major tournaments and just kind of my general thoughts on the team, I do think I have Spain taking this one over England. Frankly, just Southgate is not a guy I can see actually winning a tournament. I think he's far too negative in how he plays to win in a final. You need someone who's going to be a little bit more optimistic about the game. But just for England to even get this far with him at the helm is surprising. I've heard he might be in line for a knighthood, which is just frankly ridiculous, but I mean, good for him.
If he wins the Euros, I think it makes sense because England have had no success in any major tournaments. They're the Toronto Maple Leafs of world football. That's the best way to describe it.
I get that, but I've heard he might be in line for one even without a win in the Euro. Like, even if they lose, he might be getting one. And also,
I've heard that too.
The standard has taken some other managers to get the knighthood feels like it was a lot higher than what Southgate has done.
Well, as far as I'm aware, the only other manager who has it is Sir Alex Ferguson, and the only I may be completely ignoring people.
There's a few.
So when I think of football people who are knighted, I think of Sir Alex Ferguson, who is potentially, if not undoubtedly, the greatest manager in Premier League history. And I think of Sir Bobby Charlton, who scored the goal that won England the World Cup.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with Ferguson, though, is it took him like a decade of success to get it.
Yes.
Whereas Southgate has had... I mean, he's been, results-wise for England, good, but a knighthood, especially immediately after, feels... Like, if you want to give him one 10 years down the line for winning a Euro, that feels okay, sure.
I think, yeah, I don't think he's deserved of it at all. I think winning a Euro would definitely help his case.
Yeah.
But when you consider how many things Alex Ferguson had to win to get his knighthood, comparing that to Southgate, who has not won anything and has really only gone far in tournaments, I don't think it makes sense at all. But anyways, I don't think we should talk too much about knighthoods because, let's be real, the royal family is the reason why most people hate England. So let's talk about Copa America instead. And let's talk about Canada and how Argentina had to put on an Olympic-level diving performance to get past us.
I hate Rodrigo de Paul so much.
I think we all do. I think we do. I think Argentina, as a neutral fan for most of the part leading up to this tournament, I respected them and I admired how they were able to be so successful. But after watching how they play against teams that they're like significantly better than, I'm kind of shocked and I'm kind of disgusted.
Yeah, it's interesting for me watching this because Argentina is normally someone who I would kind of be backing in Copa America, given that they have three of my favorite players in the world. For those wondering, Messi, one of the heroes of my childhood, McAllister, possibly my favorite Liverpool player, and Emi Martinez. That's right, I like Emi, fight me. But just watching that game took away a lot of my respect for a lot of their players. Those three, it's pretty much unchanged. I thought they were fine. I don't notice anything of them that particularly annoyed me, but like Romero and DePaul in particular, have some respect for the game, please. Like, my God.
Yeah, it's really, really disappointing when you see a team like Canada that has, and I don't mean to sound like I'm like biased or whatever, but Canada shouldn't have been there, right?
No.
Like they're ranked like 40 something in the world, 48th in the world. Yeah. Argentina are number one. They won the last Copa. They won the last World Cup. It really, on paper, in betting, whatever it is, it really wasn't going to go any way but. So just watching them play that game with the first goal came off of, what was it? It was Alvarez sort of just broke through.
Yeah.
And it's like you're going up against an MLS back line. You're going up against a striker who can't strike. It's really just disappointing to watch how they played for a team with that much quality.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm whinging. If there's anything that FIFA, CONMEBOL, CONCACAF, UEFA, I don't know who would be in charge of this, can do to like work on diving in the game, the diving and the rolling around and the whining, please do it. This is just so agonizing to watch.
Yeah, the diving really took away a lot from this tournament, and it was because, as a Canadian, watching all these games with people who don't generally care about the sport, having them watch all this diving happen, basically enabled that whole group of people who could become soccer fans if they saw what the game was truly about. It completely turned them off of it. And I don't think Argentina as a team should or will be punished for their conduct.
No.
But I think that they need to have some form of ruling. Like they have to be tighter on embellishments.
Yeah.
And the refs need to be quicker to call it, because I've only ever seen diving cards being given like 2 or 3 times, and that's in multiple years of watching the sport.
Yeah, no, I had a similar experience watching Euro games on my vacation with family members, where I think soccer is a really good sport. You could create so many more fans on this continent, but diving turns people off so much because that's not something that happens over here or is heavily criticized when it happens over here, whereas in soccer it just feels like part of the game. And it absolutely should not be. Like, it's disrespectful to the other team, it's disrespectful to the fans watching. It's honestly disrespectful to yourself to be doing that on a world stage when you're a top-class athlete. Yeah, so I don't know what you can do, even if you can't punish it in-game as it happens, because I get soccer happens fast, the referee's not necessarily going to see everything all the time, and you don't necessarily want to be stopping the game to review every single embellishment that might happen. If there's a way you can, like, implement fines, create suspensions and stuff for after the game if there's a repeat offender or something. I don't know how you would do this, but please look into some situations for this, because it's frankly just embarrassing to watch this in such a major tournament.
Yeah. And it's frustrating too, because I never understood why people got so upset with Argentina after their World Cup win, because, you know, everyone talking about like for Argentina and penalty for Argentina, whatever that was. I never really understood it until it was against the team I was cheering for.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's poor sportsmanship. It sullies your reputation. It damages how everybody else sees you. So like, why, if they're doing it, if the ref is benefiting it, then it's just going to keep happening, and it's going to make the sport look worse and worse.
It is in the rules that you're not allowed to do this, but it's so unenforced that you may as well not even have a rule about it at this point. Like, and it's not even just Argentina. I'm not necessarily mad at Argentina specifically. I'm not happy with them right now because of what I witnessed the other day, but it's the sport in general does such a bad job at enforcing this, and this is a game that I love and I want to see grow. And this feels like it's holding it back so much from its potential. Like, when you see displays like this, it's going to turn off so many new fans. It turns off me. It makes me, at times, disgusted by what I am seeing on the field.
Yep, and I'll complain about it, as a fan of a team that lost to Argentina, but I'll complain about it as a fan of teams that do this. Like, when I see Canadian players and English players going to ground easily to try and sell a call, win a penalty, whatever it might be, it doesn't make any sense. Like, even your own fans know that you're taking advantage of a rule cheating. That isn't called, that you're basically cheating. Yeah.
Not even basically, you're breaking the direct rule. You are supposed to be given a yellow for this, but just no one does it, so everyone breaks the rule.
Yeah, and FIFA hasn't done anything about it. UEFA hasn't done anything about it. And people always talk about wanting to scrap VAR. VAR is the only reason why, like, half of the penalties that happen when people dive inside the box don't end up actually being awarded.
I get it sometimes, because VAR is often very badly used and it frustrates me as much as it frustrates anyone. Scrapping it is not the solution. You need to find a way to make it actually work.
Yeah.
It's a good system that is being used poorly.
Yeah, I think the thing, and I guess, I don't know, and what I also don't like particularly about seeing the diving happening in CONMEBOL and in Copa America is the fact that CONMEBOL is the most physical confederation in the world.
Yeah,
like you have studs up tackles, you have shoulder to shoulder, you have tough games being played from every team. So when you're playing like that, isn't it incredibly hypocritical of those same players to be going to ground that easily in make or break situations?
And that brand of soccer is, I think, the thing that could create the most new fans on this continent, because I think it's the most reminiscent of some of our sports. We're a hockey podcast. This is a physical sport. Football is the most popular sport in the United States. That's a physical sport. So when you see this is a game. The Copa America is a tournament that I think could help create so many new fans. But this diving, it's disgusting. Frankly, that's the only way I can describe it.
Anyways, I don't want to talk too much more about the diving.
And it feels wrong talking about soccer this much on the podcast without Mayan here. Shout, hi Mayan.
Yeah, that's our Mayan Silberstein mention for the week. I wanted to mention him from earlier as the Dutch's biggest fan, and on Sunday the Spanish biggest fan.
Previously, the Swiss biggest fan.
Yeah, and also the biggest Slovakian fan. But yeah, so I don't want to talk too much about the diving. I think we've done enough. I think
we've made our point, and frankly, we don't have an audience to make a difference here. It's agonizing.
It is agonizing. Yeah. But anyways, does anyone have any predictions for Colombia versus Argentina in the final?
That's an interesting game.
Would you like to chime in?
I don't really have a prediction, but I'm going to go against what I normally do and cheer for the team that beat my team, and I'm going to be a Colombia fan.
Yeah, I don't know. I just want a Luis Diaz hat trick or something here. Just that would be beautiful for me to see as a Liverpool fan. I do think Argentina will win. This is probably the best national team in the world at the moment. I think in the last 5 years they've won more trophies than lost games, so I'm not exactly going to be the one predicting a loss out of them. But I think in a Copa America final, especially with how passionate these players are, you're going to get a scrappy game, and I think Colombia could pull it off. Ultimately, I think we're going to see something like a 2-1 result either way.
I am going to go... This is how the game is going to go. In the 20th minute, James Rodriguez will be sent off, shown a second yellow, for what is at best a questionable foul call on a massive embellishment from Rodrigo de Paul. Argentina get a free kick in a good area, and Messi converts from just outside the box. 1-0 Argentina. After the half, Colombia find an equalizer. It's Luis Diaz, and it's 1-1. After this, I think Christian Romero will then be sent off for potentially the worst tackle we have seen in the tournament, potentially leading to an injury that forces Colombia to make a substitution. In this substitution, they bring on John Duran, MLS legend. Is he playing in this tournament? I think he is. Anyways.
Professionalism at its finest, ladies and gentlemen.
I've done no research into either of these teams. This is just what I've seen. And John Duran scores the winner in a 10v10 game in stoppage time for our friend and friend of the Chroncast, Geronimo Pereira, and his homeland of Colombia to win 2-1 within the 90 and continue their unbeaten streak of over 20 games.
God, I hope you're right.
I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah, no, I'm quite happy to see that. I mean, we've done a Copa America final prediction. We should probably do a Euro final prediction. By the way, Duran is with Colombia. Euro correct.
Let's go.
Zach, do you want to start us off on Euro final predictions?
1-1 England win on penalties, never win a game again because we sold our soul to the devil.
1-0 England win after extra time. And it's Bukayo Saka from outside the box after England play park the bus and try and force pens.
Yeah, I'm going to go with England score 1 fast, take a 1-0 lead early in the game, but concede late in the first half, goes 1-1. Nobody scores from there, goes to penalties after Southgate ball, and Spain will take the Euro.
If we lose another Euro on penalties for the second time in as many tournaments, I may stop watching this team.
It feels written in the stars at this point.
I may genuinely only watch UEFA if Israel is playing and just become a full-time Israel fan.
My heart will ache for you two, but honestly, it feels written in the stars that England will once again lose on pens.
Yeah,
you cannot tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah. Anyways, I really am hoping for an England win, but I'm not too optimistic. This whole tournament has just been me expecting the worst and somehow ending up with nice we won at the end of the game.
Welcome to Seahawks fandom.
I'm a Canucks fan. It's the same thing. It's the same with all of the teams that I support. It's an entire game of dread just to end up somehow winning at the end. And yeah, so that's all I have to say. So with if that's all that we have to talk about, then I'm going to wrap up.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much all we got for this week. Zach, anything you want to bring up?
Gonna miss Nikita Zadorov. It was nice being able to hope to see people that you don't have to look down at.
Hey, that's why I brought in Desharnais for you.
Fair enough.
Giant in, giant out.
Anyways, thank you guys for listening to this midsummer episode of the Chroncast. One of the, I guess, stranger episodes that we've seemed to have. Yeah, I guess this is probably it for a while. So I guess we'll see you maybe before preseason, but definitely when preseason starts again.
See you in September, probably. All right, thanks, everyone.